The Indianapolis Colts had a successful NFL draft, but still have needs remaining. Which position should take priority for more talent? Can the Colts realistically address these needs? And what spots do you, the fans, think Indy needs to take care of the most? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. My name is Drake Wally, deputy editor for the site and co-host of the show. And of course, as always, I'm joined by Noah Gebert, analyst for the site and fellow co-host of the show. Noah, the Colts did, I would say, a good job, of addressing needs. They had 8 total picks. That's fantastic, especially, when you're able to trade back and it doesn't hurt too bad, and you don't really lose too much. But there are still roster needs for this team. I mean, they need depth. Maybe in some areas they need starters, mostly depth. But, as we saw last year, especially on the offensive line, sometimes you need those backups. How you doing, man? And I'm excited to talk about this because it might not be something everybody wants to talk about after 8 picks were secured in the draft.
Yeah, we get all these fresh new faces on the roster, and then you still have to sit back and look. Is it good enough? Did we do enough? Is there still more that we need to add? And more often than not, with Chris Ballard's Colts, there is more often than not time to or places that you need to add at after the draft. And he's been no stranger to operating late in free agency and pre-training camp and waiver wire cuts. He's been active all throughout these months that we call the dead period of the NFL offseason between the draft and when training camp kicks off. He's usually been pretty active. So there's going to be some opportunities to grab some veterans that were on the free agency market in early March and didn't quite find a home or didn't have the market that they were looking for. So maybe you're shopping a little bit more in that famous bargain bin Ballard section that you've been used to seeing the Colts been shopping lately. But yeah, I think there's room to add at more than a few, I would say, position groups still on the roster, even with the additions of those 8 rookies. And I would say that even some of the additions of the 8 rookies in those position groups that they added, they still could you could add some more there.
Yeah, and it's really difficult when you have roster needs to address every single one of them in the NFL draft. I mean, these are going to be rookies. They're going to be guys that have no professional experience, despite, even a guy like Tyler Warren that played, I think it was 5 seasons at Penn State. This is a completely different ball game for these guys. But we'll go ahead and jump into the chat here. So, Truett, thank you so much for your super chat. As always, hell of a supporter, hell of a loyal viewer and listener. Finally, quote, the Colts have come back to the playoffs. We'll have to see about that. There's a lot of people that think, this is still a 7 to 9 win team, so we'll have to see. Maybe some of these rookies are going to make a bigger impact than what they are expected to, but that's interesting to say because it feels like that's at least what they're trying to do, especially once they signed Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum. It looked like they were trying their best to put together a playoff squad. Sean Conkright, Tony, and Antonio Moye, Colts fan from Mississippi. I love the DB pick. He's from DeSip too. I'm not 100% sure what that is. If you would clarify a little bit more.
Wally from Mississippi? Is he? Do you go to high school there?
Oh, maybe he is talking about Justin Wally. Regardless, if that is who you're talking about, Antonio, there's a lot of people that when he was selected, they were just like, why are they picking a DB? And when you look at his tape, he looks pretty good, but we'll have to see. Tracy Johnson, Mississippi in the building. So we've got some Mississippi fans here. That's pretty cool. Thank you so much for joining, guys. But without further ado, we'll just go ahead and jump into this. Before we even do, and Antonio drops a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, man. That means a lot. Especially, being from Mississippi, it's awesome that you're a Colts fan too. So
that was Justin Wally from Iberville High School in Mississippi. It looks like that's what
Okay, nice.
So
boy, that's a
deep,
deep,
the South then.
That is a deep cut right there. I like it. But yeah, so in short, roster holes. So we'll just kind of I guess prep this here. This is a team that there were some selections that you're like, what are you doing? Especially the Justin Wally pick. We thought 3rd round, you could pick defensive tackle. You could pick offensive line. There were a lot of ways they could have gone with this, maybe even some safety depth. all in all, I know we already covered this, but for those who didn't see it, I personally thought the draft could, maybe like a B plus type grade. What did you think of the draft? Did you think that more than not that they addressed most of these roster needs?
Yes and no. I think there was really too many that you weren't going to be able to fill them all in one draft. It was most position groups didn't have a ton of depth, and even the depth that you did have or you thought you had, you could always add improvements there. Wide receiver was really maybe the only position group on the roster that I was like, you're set, you don't need to add anything.
Sure.
We talked about even with the addition of Charvarius Ward and how you looked at corner, that corner wouldn't be a bad place to take a rookie. I didn't think it would be in the third round with some of the other needs that were available. But yeah, really every position group was up for grabs. And I think when you're going after like evaluating how the roster looks after these 8 rookies are added, you can pretty much go through every position group. And there's really only a couple that I'm still like, okay, you're set. You've got your guys. You can roll into the season. And really any additions to those groups I would find a little bit confusing, but outside of those 2 or 3 position groups on the roster, I'm like, yeah, for sure, you can add somebody there. You can always add more competition. The worst guy in that position group, if he gets bumped off the roster, I think you feel like you're in a better spot.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're going to dive into here. So we've got, I believe, yeah, we've got 5 of the most pressing
Mhm.
areas, from really the most to the least, that me and Noah feel like they've got to continue doing something with, and of course, most of that is going to be most of that damage, is going to be dealt through free agency.
Yeah,
So this first one here is one that I really thought that they were going to address in the NFL draft, but I think it's an indication that they believe in a certain player to take over the starting job, and that's right guard. So
yeah,
for those that aren't in the know, Will Fries dominated last year, only played 5 games. He got hurt against the Jacksonville Jaguars. His season ends, but it was in those 5 games that you just saw him mauling people. He basically showed that he is a legitimate starting right guard in the NFL. He goes over to the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, so does Ryan Kelly. And so they have this massive hole at right guard. And so they did not select a right guard. Instead, they took tackle Jalen Travis from Iowa State. Now, not to say he's not going to be a talented player, but they still do have some needs there. So, Noah, tell me a little bit about right guard, and the current state of where the Colts are at with it, because I've got our lads pulled up here, and it's looking a little bit bare, if you ask
yeah.
me.
Yeah, so I think there were opportunities to kind of do a little bit of a shuffle throughout this offseason. I think right guard, this current state that it's in now, is just by virtue of this is this is where we ended up, and these are the guys. We're gonna just try to find our best 5 on the field and put them in whatever slots that we can get them in. So you've got Matt Gonsalves really slotted in there to that starting right guard spot. Just because your other options are pretty uninspiring, if you're being honest. It's Danny Pinter and Dalton Tucker, Josh Sills, some guys that have experience, some more than others. But yeah, like a guy like Dalton Tucker, an undrafted free agent from last year who really impressed during training camp, and then you got him in the starting lineup, and you're like, okay, maybe we threw him in there a little bit too fast, and we understand he needs a little bit more time to develop. So you're not going to go into the season with him penciled in as the starter. So now you're put in this spot where you've got a former 3rd round pick who's coming off of his rookie year, now bumping over into a position that he hasn't played before or hasn't played since high school, I think is what his background was. I think every year at Pitt, he was a tackle, and then his first year he operated almost exclusively at tackle, except for a few preseason snaps with the Colts at guard. So you're really projecting there on a second-year player, which I think is the same position that has gotten the Colts in trouble in the past, where they're projecting with players who don't have a ton of experience. They were kind of like that with Nick Cross in his rookie year, at least, where they just kind of threw him in and then had to backpedal and take him out and get him on the bench until he finally had some time to develop. So you wonder if this is enough time for Matt Gonsalves to really develop, and you wonder if the evaluation that the Colts had on him, being a guy who could play guard and tackle, we don't know if that's true yet, and I don't think the Colts know that that's true yet either. I think they're just kind of hoping for the best just because of how the draft fell to them and the choices that they chose to make during their slots.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Noah said, I mean, we'll just go ahead and highlight both guard positions because sometimes these guys are just interchangeable. But Quentin on the left side, you've got Quentin Nelson and then Josh Sills. That's it. So there's really no other guard behind Josh Sills. And then you've got Matt Gonsalves, Dalton Tucker, and Antonio Mafi. Now, Antonio Mafi is a guy that if he's playing, you have had some pretty devastating things happen to your offensive line. Dalton Tucker, of course, played last season. When Will Fries was down, they switched over to Mark Glowinski. There was a little bit of an uptick in production simply because I think that he just has more experience. But Dalton Tucker started off okay, never was great. Started off okay and started to get exposed. Same thing with Glowinski. And then, of course, you've got, like I said, Matt Gonsalves, who, when they didn't select a guard to start, you kind of got the feeling, all right, they're going to slide him in from tackle. And then they took Jalen Travis to be that swing tackle to compete with Blake Freeland. But this is a position that if they have a couple of injuries, you're talking about the interior offensive line here being occupied by either Dalton Tucker or Antonio Mafi. And Anthony Richardson has shown he doesn't deal with pressure very well, which no quarterback does, but there's levels to being able to handle it. And he doesn't handle it well. And then on the other side of it, there's no worse pressure in the entire NFL than right in front of you. Because when it's coming from the side, you can either see it or you can maybe feel it and you can get rid of it, run away. You can't, it's very difficult to just like you do a U-turn and run away from an interior defender. So, do you think that the Colts whiffed this by not getting a right guard or not getting a guard? Or do you think that they were just kind of like, we don't really need to waste a draft pick on this. We're just going to turn to free agency and get a veteran down the road?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the situation is. There are still some guys on the market. I know we were talking about before the show, looking into some of those guys that were going to be available there at right guard and are still available. Since you didn't find that rookie in the draft that can come in and be that day one starter, or at least even push for that job. Yeah, so it's really hard to say. There were definitely some players available on the boards when they picked at 45 when they picked Tuamaloau, and then when they picked Justin Wally there in the third, there were some options that they could have had somebody that could at least have been competitive for those spots, if not outright won it. And that would have, I felt like, really this right guard position, if you had that locked up, like with a guy that you would for sure pencil in there as that starter, then you would feel good about your entire offensive line a little bit better because you can move Matt Gonsalves back out to that swing tackle. You're not relying on Jalen Travis, a developmental fourth round rookie, to be your primary backup at both tackle spots in that situation. So I think like finding that starter is the one thing that they missed there at right guard that would solidify offensive linemen like 4 through 7. I think you'd feel better about all of those spots on the roster if you found a guy that could sub in there. So there's guys on the roster or out on the street right now that could be available to sign. Brandon Scherf, Daniel Brunskill, Dalton Reisner. I think Will Hernandez coming off an injury. But all these guys are going to be question marks too. I think Brandon Scherf would be like the smallest question mark coming in there, but I think all these other guys, Will Hernandez coming off that injury, especially Daniel he's played guard and center, so he has some versatility there. I mean, there's options to make it like an actual competition for that spot with Matt Gonsalves. But in terms of finding that out and out starter at right guard, I think it's slim pickings at this point. It's going to be pretty much at every position group in free agency. So, I mean, the options at this position, I think are better than they are at other positions throughout the NFL. So I think the Colts got a little bit fortunate in that. So yeah, maybe they did have their eyes on a couple of these veterans and were okay not forcing the selection there at right guard in those second and third rounds because they felt like if it comes down to it, we do have some options on the veteran market.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Noah said. I mean, one guy that everyone was clamoring for the Colts to get because they didn't think Will Fries was the guy. I think it was like a season or two ago. Was Dalton Reisner. Yeah, that was a guy everyone was like, "You got to sign him. You got to sign him." He has a projected annual value of like $2.5 million. So clearly, Will Fries was a massive upgrade. But that's a guy you could bring in for competition. I think that another guy that you reconsider signing him is Mark Glowinski because he is literally on the market and he's going to be far cheaper. Then you've got guys like Jack Driscoll, I think it's Akeem Adeniji, Jake Hansen, Carter O'Donnell. I mean, we're getting to the bottom of the
Yeah.
barrel here. But if you bring in Brandon Scherf, he's starting. If you bring in Shaq Mason, he's probably starting. But everything after that, it's pretty much a
Yeah.
competition type signing. And you'd be comfortable with that because Will Hernandez, coming off that injury, is only projected to be worth an annual value of $4.5 million. Of course, this is Spotrac I'm using. But right here, Paul Wilson coming in hot with a super chat. Third one of the day. You people are amazing. Fellas, do you think we will have to wait until August for any roster changes now? Basically, the end of training camp, I guess. Roster changes. Maybe not the end of August, but it's kind of like, I can't remember who said it. Donald Markham said camp cuts are coming.
Mhm.
I mean, you're going to see that happen, and you're going to see them, investing in some of these, and we'll get to this in another episode. But some of these unrestricted free agents, you're going to, or undrafted free agents, you're going to see them kind of pick some of those guys up because, I mean, look at Dalton Tucker. He was an undrafted free agent, signed him out of Marshall, and he started.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So yeah, I mean, I would expect maybe one or two veteran signings coming up at some point. Of course, we've got the rookie mini camp coming up. I don't know if that's this weekend or if it's the following weekend, but you're going to get your undrafted free agents. I know those have been rumored, about 12 or 13 undrafted free agents. Those are going to be officially announced. So that'll be your next big change. Depending on how rookie tryouts go, then you could see some of those tryout guys maybe get a roster spot, and then you would start to see the shuffling of those back end roster guys, players 91, 92 on the roster that get dipped out in favor of some of the rookies that are coming in. So that's when you'll see your next big announcement of and flurry of roster moves is going to be in the next 2 weekends when rookie mini camps starting. And then I think, yeah, you'll see one or two vet signings before training camp. But then really when training camp gets rolling, everything's up in the air, and you're probably going to see signings every couple days of just churning the roster, looking for guys. As far as like veterans that you can bring in to be starters, I think veterans are kind of keen to the game, that they can miss out on training camp, which is probably every NFL player's least favorite part of the season. So they could skip out on that, make a signing late in the preseason and go from there.
yeah, I mean, we'll have to see because right guard, it's massively important. Obviously, everybody knows that. Will Fries leaves. You are believing in Matt Gonsalves here, and before we move on to the next position, Matt Gonsalves played both left and right tackle, played over 200 snaps for each side, over 500 total. So this was a guy that they were not expecting to have to start necessarily. Here comes Matt Gonsalves, and they believe that he can be the guy at right guard. We'll have to see, but you got to get more backup than Dalton Tucker. At the end of the day, I know that there's people that respect him. Our own Zach Hicks really liked Dalton Tucker getting signed, but he is an undrafted free agent at the end of the day, and he played like it at times. He got dominated a couple times. I think specifically it was against the Denver Broncos. You really saw him struggle. So, but the next one here is a position that they didn't outright draft anyone for. They picked Hunter Wohler in the 7th round from Wisconsin, and you're thinking, okay, they might have filled a couple of positions here. With him because he's a multifaceted weapon on defense, plays safety, plays linebacker. But this next one is huge. It is linebacker. Okay, now when we look at the depth chart, you've got some guys. We're talking. I'll go with left, middle, and right. So when we're talking about the linebackers, you're talking about Zaire Franklin and Jalen Carlisle. Then you're talking about Shagun Alubi and Cameron McGrone. Then they do have, this is our lads, but they have Liam Anderson, they have Hunter Wohler, they have Austin Ajake, and they have Jacob Phillips, and I think they even have Solomon DeShields. So outside of really Jalen Carlisle, Zaire Franklin, Shagun Alubi, and Cameron McGrone, it does kind of seem like this is a bare group. Obviously, you're really excited about what Jalen Carlisle can do. In just 10 games last year, he showed a lot of prowess in coverage. I mean, he was a hell of a cover linebacker. But this is a group that really needs a third starter level player. Just plain and simple. They're going to need that. So, Noah, what are your thoughts on the current state of the linebacker position? Of course, Zaire and Jalen, they're starters. But I just feel like that third round pick could have either been used, not
Yeah.
saying anything bad about Justin Wally, but it could have either been used on especially offensive line depth or linebacker, because it just seems like it's a pretty just like right guard in general, it seems like it's a pretty bare group with these linebackers.
Yeah, I think linebacker and guard are really up there in the 1 and 2, probably 1A and 1B in terms of holes that are still left on the roster. I think they're for different reasons. I think Jalen Carlisle, I think, is in a similar situation as Matt Gonsalves, where it's just he was a rookie last year. He didn't get a ton of run. But also Jalen Carlisle had the injury that he was dealing with last year. So you're at least Matt Gonsalves was healthy, right, throughout the entire season. So you have that to bank on. Maybe health is a little bit. Maybe you can rely on Matt Gonsalves a little bit more than you can with Jalen Carlisle. But also you've got Jalen Carlisle playing a position that he played last year, and Matt Gonsalves trying to switch to a new one. So you've got two different variables there up in the air on how you feel about those guys. But really, what gets me is the depth there at linebacker. I think it's always been thin. If you miss Zaire Franklin for any amount of time during the season, you've got Jalen Carlisle, Shegun Alubi, Cameron McGrone as starting linebackers, which as highly as we think of Jalen Carlisle on this podcast, and as highly as the Colts seem to think of Jalen Carlisle, I don't think you want to bank on that him being your number one linebacker for any stretch of time throughout the season at this point until he stays on the field at linebacker and proves himself there. So yeah, it really makes me worried there. I know the drafting of Hunter Wooler, I don't think that's going to make any impact on the defensive side of the ball, at least not in year one. So I'm not. Patrick mentioned in the last episode, Patrick Rye left a comment asking about rookies that could be cut. I think Hunter Wooler could be in that conversation. I think you have to have that conversation with like every 7th round rookie that you bring in. He could lose that job to a guy you mentioned, Solomon DeShields, an undrafted free agent. So, I mean, that you're not really counting on that to provide any valuable depth there at linebacker. And yeah, this is just like right guard, that same position where you're relying on a young player who hasn't proven himself at that position to be the guy, and you really have no backup plan at this point. So yeah, I think this is one of those areas where you would also explore the veteran free agency market. Maybe a guy like Jermaine Pratt in Cincinnati gets cut. I know there was a lot of talks about that being a possibility and the reuniting with Lou Anarumo here on the Colts, but there's also some other guys in the free agent market that would be a little bit of an upgrade over a guy like Shegun Alubi or Cameron McGrone, because I really think you do need that if you're not getting a straight up linebacker 2, then somebody who could compete with 2 or for linebacker 2 and or be a linebacker 3.
Yeah, and you're going to be bringing in this position in free agency more than likely, or like Noah said, if there is a camp cut or if there is a cut from a team, maybe you scoop up somebody. I just can't see a trade happening. But on the free agent or on the free agent tracker here, you've got some names that are pretty cheap, and they could provide you with some veteranship. Zach Cunningham is a linebacker that's been in the NFL for 8 seasons. It looks like per Spotrac, he's going to cost about 1.1, 1.5 million a year. That is easy money to pay. And then you got like guys like Nick Vigil. You've got guys like, it's a little different than what they need, but Shaquille Barrett, Matthew Adams, who I believe has played for the Colts in the past. And then of course, if you really want to get veteran, help, you've got Eric Kendricks. He's not going to cost much. You've got a guy like Kazir White. And then if you want to go on the higher end of things, CJ Mosley. That's a guy that a lot of people have thought maybe Indianapolis should take a swing on. He's 33. He's dealt with his injuries, but he's also put up some great numbers, and might just need, something new. He might need that change of scenery. But yeah, we saw it last year, okay, against the Panthers. I can't remember if it was EJ Speed or if it was Zaire Franklin. Maybe it was Franklin. But he gets hurt, doesn't play in the game, and it's Shegun Alubi. Now, this was 2023's season. Yeah, this would have been when Gardner Minshew was the quarterback. Bryce Young and the Panthers in his rookie season, they sucked. They were still under Frank Reich. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, he got canned after that loss. So it's like you beat a team. Shegun Alubi led the team in tackles in that game. I vividly remember it. But you're talking about a team that was just buns. They just weren't good. I mean, Bryce Young threw 2 pick sixes to the same guy in Kenny Moore. That was a game where, honestly, I hate to say it, but damn near anybody could have played linebacker in that game and filled in. So you are not comfortable in any way, shape, or form if Jalen Carlisle is your starter, and then you've got Shagun Alubi, and then you got Cameron McGrone
Yeah.
rotating in, especially coming off of a season-ending injury.
Yeah.
So it's a group that they really need to take seriously because teams will dominate them if they get to the second level. You're not going to have Grover Stewart or Tim Smith or Neville Gallimore or DeForest Buckner being able to stop these interior runs every single time. You got to have good linebacker support. I can just see it getting really, really hectic, if they don't do something. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is there like a name that stands out to you? I would love if they signed C.J. Mosley, but I
Yeah.
just don't think that's in the cards. But is there a guy that's on the market, or that you might, maybe Jermaine Pratt, a guy that you think might get cut and might be ripe for the picking?
Yeah, there's names like Kaiser White. I think would be more of the coverage kind of linebacker to complement a guy like Zaire Franklin. It's kind of tough to project like how they would end up. Raekwon McMillan's another name. Chris Barnes from the Cardinals. He didn't play a ton of snaps last year, but it may be a guy that you want to get in there to be a rotational guy or that linebacker three. It depends on how much people are willing to pay, also, or how much the Colts are willing to pay, also. And I know they've got some money to play with, but they like to be flexible and they like to go into the season with some operating space. So I don't think you're going to see anybody like Kaiser White. I think this projection here was around 5 million. I don't know if that's necessarily the case here. I don't know how accurate that is at this point, but I would guess it would be a cheaper signing than that we would see trying to bolster the linebacker core, something closer to the vet minimum signing like we got with Neville Gallimore on the defensive line. So yeah, you're probably looking at some of the lower end names there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the Colts like Shagun Alubi a little bit more than the general public does. So we'll wait to see if this is a move that gets made. I think Chris Ballard has been pretty open about wanting to add competition at every spot. And it seems like for the most part, he's tried to do that. So I don't know why linebacker would be any different. I don't know why you would go in there relying on Jalen Carlisle, Shagun Alubi, and then Cameron McGrone's a guy who's pretty much exclusively played special teams. He's had a few defensive snaps, but he hasn't had a ton of opportunities to get on the field on defense. So that's not somebody you want to really factor into your depth either.
Yeah, and truth be told, we like Noah said, I love Jalen Carlisle. I think that he is an absolute baller. But man, he is a safety that was converted to linebacker. So you're not, at least not yet, you're not comfortable with him just going out there and leading that core at the second level. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, they like him. They probably want him to be that guy that steps in and fills that spot. But at the same time, you can't bank on a second year player who's a former 5th round pick who changed positions, who didn't play the whole year healthy. There's too many things going against you that makes it a little less likely for him to be the long-term answer. So you need at least some competition there. And then you just hope for the best with Carlisle and hope that he comes out on top. But you definitely don't want to put all your eggs in one basket like they have in the past.
Yeah, and defense matters. And last year it was pretty up and down under Gus Bradley. So give Lou Anarumo enough. Just give him enough. They've already done it with Charvarius Ward and Juju or Cam Bynum. Just add something that's not going to necessarily be that explosive of a signing, but just continue to help Lou Anarumo because he's going to need it. He needs talent. You can't just expect him to run the show. He's going to need talent. And this next position, I know, is definitely one that Noah. We both have pounded the table for this position, and just the utter lack of depth, and it might have even needed to be number one and elevated here, but it's safety. And going back to the Hunter Wohler pick, he is slotted here as a linebacker. All right, he's not slotted in as a safety. Now this is our lads. Fair enough. I think it's the most updated version of a depth chart. Now, again, he could swing right back to safety. I think that's one of the biggest reasons the Colts selected him. But again, he is a dart throw, absolute dart throw. When you get past round 4, you're starting to kind of throw the darts without, with a blindfold on. And the later you get, especially in the seventh round, it's just like you're just kind of thinking, okay, maybe. If he works out, fantastic. Now the Colts have had a propensity to select seventh rounders that work out. They just have. But this is a position that really, really is not that great. You do have Cam Bynum. That was a sexy signing. Okay. Then you've got Nick Cross. He broke out last year. He also had to make all of the tackles. Okay, like he had to make so many tackles. You're just not going to get that many tackles again from him. But then it is absolutely barren. All right. Rodney Thomas II led the team in picks in 2022. Nothing since then. He is not a starter. He's just not a starter. Then you've got Daniel Scott, who mostly in college, I think the Colts saw him as a very athletic special teamer that could develop into something at safety. Hasn't even seen a preseason game because he can't stay healthy. And then it just goes on and on and on. It's Marcel Dabo. He's not going to be an effective player. Just at this point, it's just not happening. And then you've got Trey Washington, Jonathan Edwards, a couple names that almost no one's going to know. This is a group that desperately, desperately needs more help. And I hope they get it because, boy, if one of those two aforementioned starters goes down, who knows what could happen deep.
Yeah, and I'm pretty low on this group in general, not just because of the death, but because I think I'm a little bit more dubious on Nick Cross than most people. I'm just worried about the transition to the new scheme. He has 1 year of being a productive starter, and which is more than we can say about guys that we've been talking about in the past, like Matt Gonsalves and Jalen Carlisle. I feel a lot better about Nick Cross in that starting role than I do those other two guys because he has proven it for at least a year that he can do it. But this is a new scheme. He's still a young player, still has that 1 year of solid production, and then a couple of years before that where he just couldn't be counted on. So you hope you have to hope that he's the guy at strong safety because you don't have any other options there at this point. You mentioned Rodney Thomas, a guy who kind of had a strong rookie season, at least for his pedigree, a seventh round pick coming out, and he led the team in interceptions that year and really kind of made some people optimistic about what he might be going into the future. And then the next 2 years, it was kind of a fall off in play, and tackling has been really poor. And he didn't have that ball production that he had in his rookie year. And when that falls off and that's what you have going for you, then really you're left with bare bones if you don't get that ball production anymore. And then you mentioned Daniel Scott, like you mentioned, a special teams project, a good athlete who hasn't even seen a preseason snap. At least Marcel Dabo, that international pathway player that they have from the Stuttgart Surge out of Germany, at least he's seen some preseason snaps, at least at this point, but also he's been on the roster the past few years, largely because the Colts have had a designated spot for that international pathway program player. But 3 years into that's over now. So he just has to be outright good enough to make the 90-man roster at this point. They don't get that extra 91st roster spot throughout training camp. So he has to justify that spot. Those other names you mentioned, Trey Washington, Jonathan Edwards, those are those reported undrafted free agent signings. Edwards might be more of a corner than a safety. So even then, we don't know if they have undrafted guys at safety that are really ready to take that kind of role, which is sad when you're talking about a safety room where you're like, if they add an undrafted safety, he's got a really good chance of making the roster. Like, you don't want to be in that position, but that's where the Colts are at.
Yeah, and just looking at and Tony's nailing it in the chat there. They have plenty of names on the free agent market that they could look into. Plenty. The one that sticks out the most without question for cheap is Von Bell. And for those that don't know, he played with Lou Anarumo. That familiarity is there. It's already established. You don't have to worry about really too much being a problem because he's just going to adjust. Now, he also doesn't have Justin Bates anymore. Now who knows? Maybe one of these guys, Cam Bynum, or Nick Cross. Cross could have another great year and Bynum could keep ascending. Who knows? But then you do have guys he's basically ancient. Both these guys are ancient at this point, but they are free safeties, and that's Tashawn Gibson. That's Rodney McLeod, who previously played for the Colts. He actually shut out Nick Cross in his second season with the team. I mean, the Colts really wanted Nick Cross to start. he showed he wasn't ready. Rodney McLeod came in there and took over and played great for Indianapolis. Quandre Diggs is another guy people were absolutely pounding the table for the Colts to get. That's a veteran. Justin Simmons, that's the one that intrigues me the most because he's not going to cost a crap ton of money. And at this point in his career, he might not be able to argue to start. You're looking at probably about $7-8 million to invest in this guy. You would be getting yourself a solid rotational piece. But perhaps the biggest and most intriguing thing that I think might happen is this is a guy that last year the Colts people were absolutely blown away that they let this guy just test free agency. And the Colts were on the money. No one picked him up. They ended up re-signing Julian Blackmon to a $3.7 million deal. Okay. If he doesn't get signed, they're going to be able to re-sign him for possibly cheaper. So any one of those guys stand out to you? Do you think that they're going to go this route? I personally think that they'd be foolish to not at least sign one of these veterans. I mean, hell, even Jordan Poyer is on the free agent market. He's 34, but you're not looking for these guys to start. You're looking for maybe some starter talent from them being possibly over the hill, but with more of the intention to rotate in and be depth and maybe help a guy like Nick Cross or Cam Bynum get adjusted to things.
Yeah. Safety, luckily, seems like one of those positions where you can almost always find some guy on the street who can be a valuable piece for you, if not an outright starter. You mentioned Julian Blackmon. I think he probably doesn't want to be back with Indianapolis after the way things went this past offseason. So even if the Colts do come back, I think it would take a lot of swallowing of pride by Julian Blackmon to agree to a contract back with Indianapolis. And I think it would take some convincing for the Colts front office to want to bring him back. But yeah, I mean, that skill set, I've always, when they brought in Cam Bynum, I thought he was just like what peak Julian Blackmon could have been is kind of how I saw him. So that I know that role does exist in Lou Anarumo's defense. And I think he would fill in nicely. I just don't think that's happening. But you mentioned Von Bell. At this point, it just seems like it makes way too much sense for it not to happen. I think last year with the Bengals, he earned about $1.2 million, which is right around vet minimum for as many years as he's been in the league. Lou Anarumo and him have good chemistry and talk really highly of each other when they do interviews. And then, yeah, I mean, that safety room's just so shallow that really no matter who you're going to bring in is going to be a valuable piece. So, yeah, Von Bell, I think, is the name at this point that I would almost be surprised if it doesn't happen at some point.
Yeah, and that would be really the home run hit because you're talking about, again, seamless transition right into a defense that he just played for last season. So that would be my pick. I still think Justin Simmons would be your high-end depth guy, and that one would be a home run too. But are the Colts willing to spend like $8 million over a one-year contract? Probably not, because even then he'd have to adjust to a brand new scheme. But yeah, so safety is a huge one. That's a big one. This next one, they still need some help. I thought that more than any position in the third round, I thought this one needed help, and it's defensive tackle. Yep. So right now, we kind of hashed it out earlier, but it looks like this. You've got DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. Those are the two everybody knows. But then you've got Neville Gallimore, and then you have Tim Smith, rookie. But then you're talking about Adetomoa Adebawore, who hasn't really panned out despite how athletic he is. Feldarius Payne, Devontae Davis. Feldarius Payne and Devontae Davis, I mean, who knows if they make the roster. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this group, if you will, and just kind of how the Colts didn't address it until the sixth round. Yeah. To be fair, Tim Smith might prove me wrong, but he is strictly a run defender, which is what they needed. But you also don't want to necessarily have to lean on him to start, or Neville Gallimore if one of those two starters goes down.
Yeah, I think you entered the offseason knowing you needed to add there, and technically they did with Neville Gallimore and Tim Smith, but I wouldn't say that you've really increased what the potential of that room could be, really by any significant margin, by signing a veteran minimum free agent and a sixth round rookie and adding that to the room. It's sad when those are the two, like the strongest names that you added at a position group that was a position group of need going into the offseason. I mean, you feel really good about DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, and you kind of have to feel good about DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart because Neville Gallimore and any other team in the NFL, I feel like with that deal, the resources that the Colts have put into him, it wouldn't be surprising if he got cut on any other team in the NFL, but it's the Colts and he's defensive tackle 3 right now. And I think you keep 4 or 5 going into training camp. So I think the numbers game is on his side. I don't think you really have the horses to push a guy like Neville Gallimore off the roster at this point. Again, mentioning, I keep bringing up Patrick Rye's comment from the last episode because I feel like I totally didn't answer his question that he asked and answered a completely different question when I read it. But again, Tim Smith is a rookie that could potentially not make the roster. But it's the Colts, and he's defensive tackle 4 right now, just penciled in, I think, 4 or 5. Adetomiwa Adebawore was always going to be a project and hasn't worked out to this point at the positions that they've been trying to play him in. I don't know if they're utilizing him to his full potential, or they haven't, at least in Gus Bradley's scheme, which seemed to be a theme that happened with guys like Taven Bryan and Adebawore as well. So I just hope you can get a little bit more juice out of him with Lou Anarumo's scheme. But man, if you could sign any name or any number of names from the veteran free agency market and have somebody that would compete to be defensive tackle 2 at this point over Tim Smith and Neville Gallimore. So you're really shallow at that position, and you've got 2 guys who, have been durable for the most part, but are also getting a little bit up there in age. So I don't think you have any depth for this current season, and you don't have a long-term answer at that position either.
Yeah, and when you look at the free agent market, it has dwindled, right? Like, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. The top guy is Raekwon Davis.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those not in the know, the Colts said this was wrong to sign you to a 2-year, $7 million or $14 million deal. So they cut him, and they saved, I think, about $6 million in cap. But guys that stand out, I know he's 36, but defensive tackles can play quite a while in the NFL, especially run defenders. Linval Joseph, that's a great signing. I think if you're just looking for 1 year of veteran production, 1 year of a guy that really, I mean, he's played 15 freaking years in the NFL. I think that's great. I think that Jonathan Hankins is another guy that stands out. I think that Maurice Hurst, who's not even 30, is a guy that stands out. And then after that, it is a steep drop off.
Yeah.
Now, it's really a matter of what are you needing? What do you want? Do you want more pass rush ability, more Neville Gallimore style, or do you want more Tim Smith style? But for them to look, we don't know these draft picks like the Colts do. But for you to invest your defensive tackle depth into a 6th round pick is very bold.
Yeah.
That's really bold, and maybe there's something we don't see, but it just kind of seems like there's not a lot there. And Neville Gallimore is an awful run defender. So we'll have to see what they do. But, I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, do you think that – because God forbid, if Buckner or Stewart go down for even a game, that just sounds like a recipe for disaster unless one of those guys is signed, or just a free agent in general, preferably a run defender, because that's what a lot of teams are going to do. If one of these guys goes down, they're probably going to run the football a lot, and they're probably going to run it right in the middle.
Yeah, and that's, I think, been a theme with all these positions that we've been bringing up, where maybe the starters are there, maybe they're not, but we're one snap away from it being an absolute disaster, and I think that's the case in a lot of these positions. I think even some that we aren't including on this list of biggest roster holes, I think we're a snap away from it being a really rough-looking group. I mean, there's guys on the free agency market. You listed a few. I think a guy like Khalil Davis from the 49ers last year would be a Neville Gallimore level signing. It's going to be hard to, just because of the group that's still available at this point, to find somebody who you feel really, really good about being your third most defensive tackle who gets the third most snaps. Because you do have to replace that production that you got out of Raekwon Davis and Taven Bryan, regardless of how we feel like they performed. I think both of them ended up around 350 to 400 snaps. So that's around 700 snaps on the defensive interior that you have to fill. Neville Gallimore, I think, was a little bit less than that, was around 250-ish for the Rams this past year. So you don't want to bring a sixth round rookie. I hate ragging on Tim Smith like this. He doesn't really deserve the criticism of it, but he's in a position where he might have to take 400 snaps in his rookie year, and you never want to do that for a sixth round rookie unless they're coming out in training camp and absolutely, like, you want them to earn that spot if that's what it is. You don't just want them to have it by default. And the Colts haven't put themselves in a position where really anybody's going to be earning that spot. It just has to be given to somebody.
Yeah, and look, when it's all said and done, like Noah mentioned, we have seen this Colts team and what happens when you don't have adequate depth behind Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner. And you saw it no more than last season, especially with Raekwon Davis, because like we've said on the show, I know people have crapped on Taven Bryan. They said he sucks, he's this and that, can't defend the run. When you don't use a player properly in a scheme, especially on the defensive line, what do you expect? Like, what are you expecting them to do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they were using him more as a run defender,
Yeah.
which he is not. That's not his thing. Raekwon Davis was supposed to be that signing, this big 6'7" gap plugger, and he ended up getting moved out of the way just like a little kid at times. So
Yeah.
it's going to be crucial. It's going to be crucial for them to do something. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I feel like this is the same kind of position that a different position group is in that we'll talk about here a little bit later, where you didn't feel good about the group last year. I don't think you felt good about having Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis being your primary backups to DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. But at this point, I would probably prefer them over the situation that you're in now. Raekwon Davis and Taven Bryan, despite the poor production that they had, Neville Gallimore had equally poor production, save for the playoff game with the Rams last season, and then a sixth-round rookie to fill that gap. So I think you're even thinner than you were last year, and you felt maybe you weren't necessarily thin, but you definitely didn't get the performances that you wanted. So you at least need to put yourself in a position where you're not thin. If someone comes out and the signing that you made doesn't perform well, I applaud that a little bit more than, oh, you threw a sixth round rookie out there and he didn't perform well. What did you expect? Right? I'd rather them take the shot and actually have a chance to have a rosterable player at the position, like they did with Raekwon Davis. Yeah, he wasn't scouted well. Like it ended up not being a good fit. He didn't perform well. Yeah, but they went out and they spent resources at the position to try to plug that hole, and they just haven't done that at this point in the offseason.
Yeah, and once it's all said and done, I just hope that they do something, because this cannot keep happening. And actually, a couple things real quick. Stopping the run looks scary. If 90 or 99 are not on that field, it kind of does. Or if they're not healthy, I guess is the better thing, because then you've got Gallimore and Tim Smith doing their thing. That's what they're there for. But if they're injured, one of them's hurt even for a game or a couple snaps, you're just like, holy cow, what the hell are we doing? And then, of course, I love what Tracy Johnson said here, is that Linval Joseph is the one, if we're talking run stuff. Look, Linval Joseph is old. He's the oldest defensive tackle on the market, but he just does his job. He stays in the league. He hasn't retired. He hasn't been, it's not like he hasn't been able to find a team. So a team that needs somebody who's just a veteran just to come in there and just do some pretty simple stuff based off of defensive tackle NFL standards, that's the guy. I think that should be the top guy, given like what they're trying to accomplish here. They don't need a starter.
Yeah.
So,
and Tony here mentions Joe Evans having talent as an undrafted free agent who the signings haven't been made official again, but rumored to have signed. But you're at the point where you're like, please, I hope we have an undrafted free agent that can come in and stop the run, because we're in that position where you can't really rely on anybody else on the roster. So yeah, maybe Joe Evans does have talent, but that's just a testament to the state that the roster's in, where you're feeling like hopefully this undrafted guy can save us. And if you're in that spot, it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's definitely a position of need. But this last one was kind of what, Noah was alluding to. And that is very simply the tight end position.
Yep.
Now, this was a disaster, just an absolute disaster last year. And I know Richardson couldn't even hit the broadside of a freaking barn. I know that Joe Flacco was, basically out there in with a walker trying to throw the football. But more so with Flacco was the downside to this because Flacco was at least accurate. Flacco, while he has a cannon for an arm, everyone was like, well, the offense doesn't change much when Richardson's not out there and you put Flacco in because they both have similar arm strength.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, Joe Flacco can't move to save his life. Number two, Joe Flacco is a check down god. He loves to throw short, simple, quick passes, easy passes. That's supposed to be what the tight end is great at. And you had Drew Ogletree, couldn't eclipse 10 catches. Mo just did typical Mo Alleycock stuff, which is just catch a couple touchdowns and block. Will Mallory, he goes from being this kind of sort of like intriguing, promising guy to a dude who can't even catch more than, he caught 4 passes. That's all you need to know. Kylan Granson led the team in catches. He had like 14 or 16 or some absolutely awful number like that. 39 total catches from 4 tight ends. They got Tyler Warren. Huge, huge get. But when you look at this tight end room, everyone immediately said it's been upgraded. Yes, it has.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are going to be times, though, where they're going to need, I dare say, another receiving tight end maybe at some point. It's not happening with Mo. It's not happening with Drew Ogletree. Who knows about Will Mallory? Tell me a little bit about this position. And don't forget, people, there is another tight end that they still do have that people are hoping might just break out of nowhere, and that is Jelani Woods, the ghost himself.
Forgot completely about him. No, so we're just sitting there at tight end. Yes, definitely Tyler Warren drastically upgrades that room by a lot. And in a perfect world, you're going in. I don't know if this is the perfect world, but you're going into the season with Tyler Warren as your tight end 1. And then when you go with the 2 tight end sets, you bring Mo Alley-Cox in, let him be the inline guy. And that gives you the freedom to move Tyler Warren out to the slot, into the backfield, just kind of off the wing there. Just ability to move him around, be that F or that H at tight end. And you'd feel, I think, for the most part, pretty good about that. But one snap away, just like we've said with every position group that we've gone over, if Tyler Warren goes down, then you're down to exactly what you had at tight end last year, minus Kylan Granson, who had 480 snaps. So you're relying on Will Mallory to be that Kylan Granson, and Will Mallory couldn't beat out Kylan Granson for any offensive snaps or the past season. So, we pretty much agreed that this was the worst position group on the team going into the draft or going into the offseason. One of the worst position groups probably in the NFL amongst all position groups, amongst all teams. They were definitely the worst tight end group. If not, then they were 31st in the NFL. So you're one snap away from being even thinner than you were last year. And that scares me a little bit because you're not going to get consistent production from that group. We've already proven that over the course of an entire season in Shane Steichen's offense. The offense hasn't changed. It's still the same offense. And you've got 3 guys who have proven that they can't produce in this offense at this point, at least in terms of being receiving tight ends or a receiving threat. Jelani Woods this is that position where you have to hope that he's something, because I think that's the only way you would feel good about going into this season without making an addition, is if Jelani Woods can stay healthy and be an impact player on the roster. He would be that guy that would challenge for those Kylan Granson lost snaps that Will Mallory's probably not pushing for. So and that chances of that happening at this point in his career after the past 2 seasons of not being on the field, it looks lower and lower every day that passes that he's not fully healthy and participating in team activities. So you worry about that for sure. And if that's not going to come into fruition for you, then you're really looking at a thin group, just like you are with every other position group we've talked about tonight.
Yeah, and you do have. I'm looking at the back end of this depth chart here. You've got Alberto, you've got Sean McKeon, you've got Jelani Woods. All right, and that's behind Will Mallory. So that is just not acceptable. you have to treat it like, what if, I mean, obviously knock on wood, but what if Tyler Warren does go down with an injury? Then you have to start asking yourself, what do we do here?
Yeah.
And there are a couple. Truett, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much for the super sticker right at the end of the show. Guy is absolutely dialed the hell in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Then you got to ask yourself, what about the free agent market? Well, it's not. He's going to turn 41. Okay. But Mercedes Lewis has been producing in this league and is very similar to uh, Linval Joseph. He just keeps finding teams to play for. Gerald Everett would be a good addition as well. There's Jordan Akins, there's CJ Uzama, there's Jeff Swaim, there's Nick Vannett, there's Hayden Hurst, who hasn't really done a crazy amount of stuff, but he has started before. So there's guys here that can work out. Anthony Ferkser's another guy. He'd be super duper cheap. Just something here. Probably you're looking at, if you really want an impact, some kind of impact, right? You're looking at Hayden Hurst or higher. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to see. But what are your thoughts on some of those names? What are your thoughts on this group behind Tyler Warren? Because I don't think people have considered what happens if Warren goes down with an injury, if even for half of a game or, a prolonged amount of time.
Yeah, and I don't blame them for not considering that. That's the last thing you want to think about when you draft somebody 14th overall that pretty much the entire fan base has been clamoring for months on end. You finally get the guy, you don't just immediately want to go to worst case scenario with what happens. But sure, as the GM, Chris Ballard needs to be prepared for that in every situation, and he's very much not. You mentioned before they drafted Tyler Warren, I don't even think they could have fielded a team there and felt good about it, right? That was the one position on the roster where you if you had to send out a starting 11, you're looking around, shrugging your shoulders, I don't know who to throw out there at this point. And you would be in that situation where you'd have probably Mo Alley-Cox be your starter there, and then you'd be trying to have Will Mallory fill that Kylan Granson or that now what is that Tyler Warren role, and that's just a guy that hasn't produced in the NFL at this point. And I mean, there's always high hopes for pretty much every draft pick that comes in for the Colts, but let's be honest, he was a 5th round tight end who has not produced in 2 years. If you're looking for him,
and he's limited.
He's
limited to what
he's limited, and you can't really play him in line. He's not going to be a viable blocker for you, so you have to play him to be that receiving threat or that move guy. And maybe there's a little bit more that you can dig into with Drew Ogletree, and you can kind of round out that game a little bit. He's proven to be a good blocker, but not the receiving threat that maybe we thought he was going to be, being a converted wide receiver out of Youngstown. It was just an empty group, and it's without Tyler Warren, man, it would be so empty. So that's something that addition was sorely needed, and you just have to hope that holds up, because you still have nothing behind there.
Yeah. I mean, look, when it's all said and done, this is a team that needs more. They still need more. And they really, really, this is a position to kind of wrap up the episode. This is specifically a position that I think that when they picked Tyler Warren, they didn't necessarily, I mean, they're probably still going to try to do something behind him. But I think that they love Mo Alley a lot. I really do. I think that they believe in Drew Ogletree, and I think that they still want to see what they have with Will Mallory. Now, you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot believe in this trifecta of those 3 guys. You just can't. They didn't do enough. And when you remove Kylan Granson from this situation, he was your most productive tight end last year. And the guy did nothing. He did nothing. He still didn't score any touchdowns. That's his thing, is he is allergic to the end zone. So you need a tight end who can at least do something. We'll have to see. I think that when they drafted Tyler Warren, they thought, well, everything's peaches and cream for the tight end, and it's really not.
And there was this comment from Truitt that went along with his super sticker. You guys convinced me we stink. That wasn't really the intent of the episode when we were going in. We have a whole section there of position groups that we feel really good about. But Drake and I, once we get going, we keep going. So we'll save that for probably our next episode, where we're going over the position groups that we're actually excited about. We think they made some good additions. We feel good about the starters. We feel good about the depth. And there's not a ton of those, but there is definitely those groups that they addressed well. So we'll try to reverse course probably come Thursday and convince you otherwise, Truitt.
Yeah. Well, everybody, that is the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Indianapolis Colts on SI for our written work. And then, of course, on X, we are at Colts_SI. Subscribe to Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube and click that bell, as always, to turn on the notifications so you don't miss anything, including breaking news, which inevitably will happen. Want to listen to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast? Absolutely no problem. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever else you listen to that good stuff. We appreciate you all. So tune in on Thursday. We're going to be right back here. And like Noah said, before we get into the wonderful, yet sometimes kind of boring offseason stuff, we are going to talk about the flip side of this. There are several positions, at least a handful of positions we feel good about. We'll be able to dive into those quite extensively, kind of like we did with these. And we'll make you guys feel a little bit better about this team, and hopefully Truitt, the next time you don't have to say that we convinced you that this team stinks. I mean, to an extent they kind of do based off of last year, but we will have to see. So until then, everybody, have a wonderful Monday, have a wonderful week, and we will be seeing you all again on Thursday night. Take care.